A hand cracked across a young woman's face. The sound carried over the music, over the laughter, over every clinking glass in the hall. 200 guests went still all at once. The young woman did not fall, she did not cry. She just stood there with a silver tray of champagne flutes balanced perfectly in her hands, even as a red mark bloomed across her cheek. Not one glass had spilled. The woman who struck her wore white, a long white veil, a long white gown. White gloves stained with the powder of the maid's makeup. The bride's eyes were the color of frozen blood, and when she opened her mouth, her teeth caught the light. Her name, the bride's name, was Seraphine Vale, and the maid she had just struck was about to do something nobody in that room could have predicted. Stay with me on this one. To understand what happened in the next 60 seconds, you have to understand who was in that room. The wedding was at the Greyburn estate, a massive stone manor on the edge of a cliff looking out over a black sea, the kind of place that has been in one family for 400 years, the kind of place where the front doors weigh more than the people walking through them. Lord Ashton Greyburn had inherited it all from his father, a man who had built a shipping empire that stretched across half the world. Ashton was 38 years old, tall, quiet, the sort of man who shook hands with everyone, even the servants. He had never married, he had never even come close. And then, 6 months before that wedding, he had met Seraphine Vale at a charity dinner in the city. And from that night on, Ashton Greyburn was no longer his own man. Now the Vale family, the Vales were not new money, the Vales were not even old money, the Vales were older than money itself. They had estates in every country in Europe. They had paintings of themselves on the walls of small private museums. Some of those paintings were 300 years old. Some of them showed faces that looked exactly the same as the faces of the Vales who were alive today. Nobody in the polite world ever mentioned that part. The polite world had agreed a long time ago to look the other way when it came to the Vale family, because the Vales had money, because the Vales had names, because the Vales were dangerous to cross. Seraphine was the youngest daughter, 26 years old by appearance. Black hair, pale skin, eyes the color of old wine. She had been engaged twice before, and both times the wedding had been called off at the last minute. Neither of the previous grooms had been seen since. Their families had been quietly paid off. The Vales were good at quiet payments. They had centuries of practice. Ashton Greyburn knew none of this. He thought he had won the heart of an heiress. He thought the strange customs of the Vale family were old-world charm. He thought the long nights, the closed curtains, the cold hands, the way Seraphine never ate at dinner. He thought all of it was eccentricity. He was in love, and love makes a smart man stupid, believe me. The wedding was set for the night of the full moon. The ceremony was held just before sunset on the lawn behind the manor. The reception was inside in the great hall lit by hundreds of candles. 200 guests, half of them were Greyburn's people, his business partners, his old school friends, his cousins from the country. The other half were Vales, and the Vales did not mingle with the Greyburn side. They sat on their side of the hall in their black suits and their dark dresses, watching everything with quiet, hungry eyes. Now here's the thing, among the staff that night there were 43 people, catering staff, butlers, footmen, maids. They had been brought in by an agency. They wore black uniforms with white aprons and white gloves. They moved through the hall like furniture, invisible to the guests. That was the whole point. They were supposed to be invisible. But one of them was not what she seemed. Her name on the agency books was Alina Mara, 24 years old, from a small town 3 hours north of the estate. She had clean references. She had worked weddings before. She was quiet, polite, and competent. Nobody had any reason to look at her twice. Alina had been working at the Greyburn estate for 3 weeks. She had paid her way onto the catering list with money that had been saved for years. She had spent those 3 weeks learning the manor, learning the guest list, learning the rhythms of the Vale family. She had said almost nothing to anyone. She had kept her head down. She had served drinks. She had cleared dishes. She had watched. What Alina knew that nobody else in that room knew was the truth about the Vales, what they were, what they had done, and what they were planning to do that night. You see, in the Vale tradition, a wedding to a human husband was not a marriage, it was a transaction. The human husband brought his wealth, his name, his bloodline, and on the wedding night after the music had stopped and the last guests had gone home, the human husband was drained, every last drop. The Vale family would absorb his fortune, they would absorb his estates, they would absorb his blood, and the bride would walk away a widow before sunrise. Ashton Greyburn did not know this. Nobody on the Greyburn side knew this. They thought they were attending a wedding. Alina knew, Alina had known for years, and Alina had come to that wedding for one reason, to stop it. But there was more too, something Alina had not told anyone, something nobody in that room had any reason to suspect. Alina Mara was not Alina Mara. The name on her agency papers was a name her mother had given her, the night she had been smuggled out of the Vale estates 23 years ago. Her real name was something older. Her real name was Leora of the Lycaria, and the Lycaria were the only thing in this world the Vales had ever been afraid of. Now the slap did not come out of nowhere. The slap came at the end of a long day of small humiliations. Seraphine Vale was a creature who fed on small humiliations the way other people feed on bread. Throughout the day, she had snapped at 3 different members of the staff. She had thrown a glass of wine at a footman. She had ordered a maid to her knees to fix the hem of her dress, and she had stood on the maid's hand while it was being done. She had laughed when the maid had cried. The Greyburn family had been mortified. Lord Ashton had taken Seraphine aside and quietly asked her to please be kinder. Seraphine had smiled and said, "Of course, my love," and then she had gone right back into the hall and continued exactly as she had been. Alina had watched all of this. Alina had said nothing. Alina had served drinks. Alina had cleared dishes. Alina had waited. The slap came in the hour after the meal. The bride and groom were standing near the dance floor, greeting their guests. Alina was passing through with a tray of champagne. Seraphine reached out as Alina walked past and took a flute from the tray. As she did, the back of her glove brushed against Alina's wrist, and in that brushing, Seraphine felt something, a heat, a pulse, something she had never felt before, something her ancient instincts recognized but could not name. Seraphine looked up. She looked into Alina's eyes, and for 1/2 of 1 second, she saw something there that should not have been possible. She did not understand what she was seeing. She did not think it through. She just struck, pure instinct, a vampire's instinct. When it sees something that frightens it, it strikes first. And that is the slap that brought 200 guests to silence. She did not move for a long moment. The hall was completely silent. 200 guests, not one of them breathing loud enough to hear. The musicians had stopped. The candles flickered. Somewhere in the back of the hall, a glass slipped from a footman's tray and shattered on the marble floor. Nobody turned to look. Seraphine drew herself up. She lifted her chin. She was the bride, she was a Vale, and she had just struck a member of the staff in front of her own guests. The proper move in her mind was to make this about her, to make Alina seem clumsy, to make Alina seem at fault. Then everyone would relax, then the music would start again, then the wedding would continue. "Apologize," Seraphine said. Her voice was clear, cold, carrying. "Apologize to me, and then take your tray and get out of my sight." Alina did not move. The mark on her cheek was darkening, a red welt rising, a small trickle of blood at the corner of her lip where the glove had caught her teeth. Her face was still. Her eyes were on Seraphine's eyes. She did not apologize. She did not move. Lord Ashton stepped forward. "Seraphine," he said quietly, "perhaps we should." She held up a hand without looking at him. "I asked her to apologize. I am waiting." Alina bent slowly at the knees. She set the silver tray down on the floor, carefully. The flutes did not even chime against each other. She straightened back up. And then she spoke. What she said was not in English. It was not in any language anyone in the Greyburn family had ever heard. It was a soft, 3-syllable phrase, the kind of phrase you might say to a child who had wandered too close to the edge of a cliff, almost gentle, almost a warning. Nobody on the Greyburn side understood it. They thought she was babbling. They thought she had hit her head. But on the Vale side of the hall, every single guest understood it, and every single Vale in that room went perfectly still. You have to understand, the Vale family had not heard those words spoken aloud in 3 centuries. Those words belonged to a language that had been dead for hundreds of years, a language that had been spoken by only one bloodline, a bloodline the Vales had wiped out, root and branch, in a single night of fire and steel 240 years ago. That language was the language of the Lycaria. An old woman sitting at the head of the Vale family table, Seraphine's grandmother, who had not been seen on her feet in 2 decades, slowly stood up. Her hands were shaking. She had been alive when the Lycaria were killed. She had been there, and she remembered those words. She remembered the night they had been screamed at her by a dying mother who had cursed her family before the fire took her. The old woman's voice came out in a whisper. "It can't be." Seraphine turned to her grandmother. The old woman raised one trembling finger and pointed at Alina. "Look at her hands," she whispered. "Look at her hands." Alina raised her right hand slowly. She turned the palm upward. On the inside of her wrist, just above where her pulse should have been, was a mark, a small dark mark, the shape of 3 intersecting lines, a mark that had been hidden under her sleeve for 23 years. The mark began to glow. It was not bright, it was not theatrical. It was a soft red glow, like the embers at the bottom of a fire, but every Vale in that room could see it, and every Vale in that room knew exactly what it was. The grandmother sat down, her knees gave out. She made a small sound, not quite a word, and then she covered her face with her hands. Across the hall, a Vale uncle stood up and backed away from his chair. A Vale cousin grabbed her child and pulled the child onto her lap. Two Vale men near the door began to move, very quietly, toward the exit. Seraphine's mother, Lady Vasilia Vale, stood up. She was taller than her daughter, older, harder. Her eyes were the color of old rust. She fixed her stare on Alina. "Whoever you are," she said, "you are about to make the worst mistake of your life. Walk out of here now. Walk out and we will pretend we never saw you. Stay, and what happens next will not be quick." Alina did not look at her. Alina was looking only at Seraphine. "You struck me," Alina said in English. Her voice was soft. "You don't even know why you struck me." Seraphine took a step back. "What are you?" "You felt something when your glove touched my wrist, didn't you?" Seraphine did not answer. "Your body remembered something your mind never learned," Alina said. "Your family killed mine 240 years ago. They thought they killed all of us. They didn't. There was one, my great-great-grandmother. She was 3 years old. A servant girl hid her in a flour sack and walked her out of the house while everything burned. That girl grew up. She had a daughter. That daughter had a daughter. And that daughter had me." Lord Ashton was staring at her. His mouth was open. He looked like a man who was watching the world he understood dissolve into something else. "Ashton," Alina said. She turned her head and met his eyes for the first time. "I am sorry. I tried to find a way to tell you. There wasn't one you would have believed." "Tell me what?" "They are not what they say they are. Your bride, her family. They were never going to let you see the sunrise." Lady Vasilia took a step toward Elena. "Enough, boys." 3 young men from the Vale side of the hall stood up. They had the same pale skin as Seraphine, the same dark eyes. They moved together quickly, the way wolves move when one has given the signal. They came around the long tables. They came toward Alina. Alina did not back away. She turned to face them. The first one reached for her arm. What happened next was so fast that most of the guests on the Greyburn side never quite saw it. The young man's hand closed around Alina's wrist. Alina's other hand came up, palm flat, and pressed against the center of his chest. Just pressed. No swing, no fist, just a flat palm. The young man flew backwards, not stumbled. Flew. He hit the long table 6 feet behind him so hard that the table cracked in half. Plates and glasses cascaded onto the marble floor. 200 guests gasped at once. Somebody screamed. The other 2 Vale men froze. Alina had not moved her feet. She had not even taken a breath. Lady Vasilia's face went rigid. "Take her." "Mother, no," the grandmother whispered from her chair. "Vasilia, listen to me. You don't understand what she is. You weren't there, I was there. You cannot take a Lysaria. You can only." "I said take her," Vasilia hissed. The 2 remaining Vale men did not move. It was Seraphine who moved. She had not spoken a word during any of this. She had been standing in her white dress, in her white veil, with her white gloves slowly being clenched into fists. The wedding had been hers. The night had been hers. The future had been hers. And now this woman, this maid, this thing, was unwinding all of it in front of the people whose respect she had spent 6 months earning. Seraphine showed her teeth. The whole room saw them this time. The Greyburn guests on the far side of the hall, the cousins, the school friends, the business partners, they saw what their friend Lord Ashton had been about to marry, and they understood all at once what their world really was. Several of them stood up, several of them backed toward the doors. Seraphine lunged at Alina. She was fast. She was vampire fast. She crossed the distance between them in less than the time it takes to blink. Alina caught her by the throat. "Mother." Seraphine's body twisted, her legs kicked, her hands clawed at Alina's wrist, but Alina's grip did not move. Alina held the bride 6 inches off the ground by the throat with one hand, and the mark on Alina's wrist was glowing brighter now, bright red, bright enough to throw shadows on the marble floor. "You don't know what I am," Alina said, quietly, almost gently. "Your grandmother does, ask her sometime." She set Seraphine down. The bride collapsed onto her knees. She did not get up. Alina looked at Lord Ashton. "We have to leave," she said, "right now." Ashton was staring at his bride on the floor, staring at her teeth, staring at the long pale fangs that had not been there an hour ago. He looked at Alina. He nodded. Alina reached out her hand to him. He took it. They walked across the hall together. The Vale men did not stop them. The grandmother did not stop them. Lady Vasilia stood at the head of the table with her fists at her sides and her teeth bared, and she did not stop them either, because she had seen what Alina had done to her nephew. She had seen the glow on Alina's wrist, and she was old enough to know what came next if she pushed. But that did not mean she was finished. That did not mean any of this was finished. Alina and Ashton walked out the front doors of the Greyburn estate. The wedding behind them was already burning down. The night air outside hit them like cold water. The estate gardens stretched out in front of them, lit by old lanterns. Past the gardens, the long driveway. Past the driveway, the gates. And past the gates, parked on the side of the road, a single black car with its headlights off. Alina did not let go of Ashton's hand. She pulled him down the steps, across the gravel, across the wet grass of the lawn. They moved quickly but did not run. Running, Alina knew, would have triggered the chase instinct. The Vales at the door were watching them go, watching but not yet moving. They reached the gates. The driver of the black car got out and opened the back door. He was a man in his 50s, gray at the temples, with steady hands and watchful eyes. He nodded at Alina. He did not speak. Ashton climbed in first. Alina followed. The driver shut the door behind them. He walked around. He got behind the wheel. He started the engine, quietly. He pulled away from the curb, quietly. Within a minute, they were on the country road that led away from the estate. The lanterns of the estate fell behind them. The driveway disappeared. The road went dark. Alina let out a breath. Her shoulders, which had been locked since the moment she had walked into that wedding, finally lowered. Ashton sat next to her in the back of the car. He was very quiet. He was staring at his hands. "Who are you?" he said finally. Alina looked at him. The mark on her cheek was already fading. The mark on her wrist had stopped glowing. She looked in that moment like the maid she had been pretending to be, just a tired young woman in a black uniform. "Someone who's been hiding for a long time," she said. Ashton nodded slowly. He did not know what to do with that answer, but it was the answer he had. The car drove on. The road was empty. The night was quiet. For one long, beautiful moment, they were safe. The trigger came 30 seconds later. It came in the form of a single pair of headlights far behind them, rounding the bend on the country road, then a second pair behind the first, then a third, then more. Alina turned in her seat. She looked through the back window. She counted 6, 7, 8. They were coming on fast, 2 in the light, the rest fanning out behind. She turned back around. "How many do you have?" she said to the driver. 3 more cars, the driver said, 2 miles east. They are already moving to intercept the rest at the crossroads. "Will it be enough?" The driver did not answer. Ashton looked between them. "Wait, who are you? What is happening?" Alina turned to him. "Ashton, I need you to listen to me. The people in those cars behind us are not just from the Vale family. They have called for help. There is a network. There are families like the Vales in every major city in this country. They are all connected. They are all old. And right now, every one of them is being told that a Lysaria is out in the open. Tonight, for the first time in over 200 years. They will come for me, and they will come for you because you saw what they were." "What I saw was real." He swallowed. "What I saw is not possible." "What you saw," Alina said, "has been quietly possible for thousands of years. You are not the first man this has happened to. You are just one of the few who is going to live through it." The driver took a sharp turn off the country road, down a smaller side road. The black car's headlights were off. He was navigating by moonlight and memory. Alina had no idea how he did it. He had been her grandmother's driver for 40 years. He had been her grandmother's bodyguard before that. His name was Marcus, and he had been quietly arranging this rescue for almost a year. The cars behind them missed the turn. For a moment, the road was dark again. If you have made it this far with me, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button below, because what happens in the next part of the story is the part nobody believes. The part I almost did not tell. Stay with me. Marcus reached a small wooden bridge over a stream. He drove across it, killed the engine, and let the car coast quietly into a stand of trees on the far side. He pulled the parking brake. He turned in his seat. "They will find us within 15 minutes, he said. "We need to be inside the safe house by then. The safe house is a mile up that hill. We walk." Alina nodded. She opened her door. "Wait," Ashton said. "Wait, just wait." She paused. "My family," he said, "my business, my life. My friends were at that wedding. My cousins were at that wedding. I cannot just disappear." "You can," Alina said, "or you can be drained on a marble floor in your own great hall. Those are the 2 choices tonight." He stared at her. You loved her, Alina said, her voice softened. I know you did, but the woman you loved was not the woman who slapped me tonight. The woman you loved was a performance. It was always going to end the way it almost did, tonight, on your wedding night, always. Ashton looked down at his hands. The wedding band was still in his pocket. He had been going to put it on her finger in less than 2 hours, by candlelight in the upper hall in front of his closest friends. He had practiced the speech he would say afterwards. He had imagined the first dance. He closed his eyes. He nodded. Up the hill, he said. They walked, Marcus led, Alina followed. Ashton brought up the rear. They moved through dark trees, up a steep slope, on a path that was barely a path. Marcus knew every step of it. He had walked it 100 times in preparation. Behind them, at the bottom of the hill, they began to hear engines again. The Vales had not lost them. They had only been slowed. They are using dogs, Marcus said quietly. Listen. Ashton and Alina listened. They were barks, not normal dog barks, lower, stranger. Hounds of the bloodline, Marcus said, bred for this. They can follow a Lysaria. They are not afraid of you, Leora. It was the first time he had called her by her real name. Ashton looked at her. Leora, he said. She did not turn around, keep moving. The safe house was an old stone cottage at the top of the hill. It had no electricity. It had no windows on the ground floor. The door was 3 inches of solid oak. Marcus unlocked it. They went inside. Marcus locked the door behind them. He bolted 3 bolts. He turned a key. Inside, the cottage was already prepared. There were maps on a table. There were old weapons on the wall, a long knife, a sword, several wooden stakes. There was food in a basket. There was an old woman sitting in a chair near the fire. Ashton stopped at the door. The old woman was very small. She was wrapped in a gray shawl. Her eyes were sharp. She looked up as they entered. She looked at Alina, and her face, for one moment, just one moment, broke. Grandmother, Alina said. Now this was not the Vale grandmother. This was Alina's grandmother, the woman who had carried her own daughter out of a burning house as a child, who had raised that daughter in hiding, who had then raised her granddaughter in hiding, who had spent her entire life waiting for the night Alina would walk back into the open. That night had come. Alina went to her. She knelt by the chair. The old woman put a hand on Alina's hair. Did they hurt you? The grandmother said. A slap, nothing more. Show me your mark. Alina pulled back her sleeve. The mark was no longer glowing, but the old woman looked at it for a long time anyway. It is your turn then, the grandmother said. It is your night. Ashton stood awkwardly by the door. Marcus crossed to a window and looked out. The barking was getting closer. How long? Alina said. Long enough, the grandmother said. Listen to me, child. Tonight is not the end of this. Tonight is the beginning. The Council of Elders has been called. They have been called by the Vales, but they are no longer answering only to the Vales. They have been waiting for centuries to hear those 3 syllables you spoke tonight. They will come. They will come to the old place. They will come because, by their own ancient law, they must. The old place, Alina said. Yes, I am not ready. You are the only Lysaria left in this world, the grandmother said. Ready does not enter into it. You are it. She turned her sharp eyes to Ashton. And you, young man, you are the husband who was meant to be drained. You are the proof. You are coming too. Ashton opened his mouth. He closed it. He nodded. A long, low howl rolled up the hill. The hounds had reached the foot of the slope. Marcus turned from the window. We have to move. Now they are faster than we thought. The grandmother shook her head. I am not coming. Mother. I am not coming, Marcus. I am too old and you know it. I would slow you down. I will stay here. I will hold the door. They will spend an hour breaking through it. That is the hour you will need. Alina's face went hard. Grandmother, no. The old woman took Alina's hands. Child, do you remember the story I told you the night you turned 10 about the candle? Alina did not answer for a moment. Then she nodded. A candle is not the same as a flame, the old woman said. You can extinguish a candle. You cannot extinguish a flame. The flame goes on. The flame jumps to a new candle. I am the candle, child. You are the flame. Go. Alina's eyes were wet. She did not cry. She had not been raised to cry. She bent and she kissed her grandmother on the forehead. Go, the old woman said. Marcus opened a second door at the back of the cottage. There was another path, another car hidden in a barn at the bottom of the next valley, another stretch of darkness to cross. Alina went out first. Ashton followed. Marcus came last. As they crossed the back garden, they heard the first impact against the front door of the cottage. A heavy thud, then another, then the howl of the hounds just outside, then the old woman's voice from inside, very calm, very clear, speaking in the dead language of the Lycaria. A warding, a holding, a door that could not be opened by any of them, not while she was alive. They ran, they reached the barn, they got into the new car. Marcus started the engine and tore out of the barn doors so fast the wood splintered behind them. By the time they hit the main road again, the cottage on the hill was on fire. They could see it through the trees, orange, bright, burning. Alina did not look back, she had been trained not to look back, but Ashton looked, he looked for a long time. "What is the old place?" he said quietly. "It is where the Lycaria were murdered," Alina said. "It is where the Vale family rose to power. It is where everything that has happened in this world for the past 240 years began, and tonight it is where it ends." The car drove east through the dark. The sky was just starting in the very far distance to think about turning gray, but the dawn was still hours away. The old place was a ruin. It sat in a valley 3 hours east of the Greyburn estate, stone walls without a roof, black with old fire, vines growing through the windows, a flat courtyard in the center where grass and weeds had reclaimed what had once been a great hall. From the road it looked like nothing, a forgotten ruin, a piece of history nobody cared about anymore. But as they came up the dirt drive, Alina saw the cars, not Vale cars, older cars, sleeker, black, but a black that drank the moonlight, 6 of them parked in a half circle around the courtyard. Outside each car stood 2 figures, tall, still, watching the road. "The council," Marcus said. "They came faster than I thought." "How many?" Alina said. "All 12 houses are here." She nodded slowly. "What is the council?" Ashton said. Marcus answered because Alina did not. The Council of Elders is the oldest body of authority among the bloodlines. They predate the Vales by 1,000 years. They are not friends of the Lycaria. They are not friends of anyone, but they have laws, old laws, and one of those laws is that a bloodline cannot be murdered by another bloodline in secret. If it is done, it must be answered. If it is answered, it must be answered in front of the council. That is what tonight is. "And the Vales," Ashton said. "They are already here." He pointed. On the far side of the courtyard, parked against a broken wall, were 3 more cars, Vale cars, and outside them stood Lady Vasilia Vale and the Vale grandmother and 4 of the Vale men, and 1 figure in white, still in the wedding dress, still in the torn veil. The dress was stained with mud at the hem, but it was still her. "Seraphine." Marcus parked, he shut off the engine. The 3 of them sat for a moment in silence. "Leora," Marcus said. He did not turn around. "You do not have to do this tonight. We can keep running. We can cross a border. We can disappear for another 20 years. They will not find us if we are careful." Alina was quiet for a long moment. "My grandmother is dead," she said. "She died for tonight. She did not die so I could run." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "I knew you would say that. I had to ask." She opened her door. She got out. She walked across the courtyard toward the council. You have to understand what she looked like in that moment. She was still wearing the black uniform of a catering maid, the white apron, the white gloves. The mark on her cheek had faded, but you could still see where it had been. Her hair was tied back. She had no weapons. She had no armor. She had nothing but the mark on her wrist and the language she had been taught and the name she had been hiding her entire life. She stopped in the center of the courtyard. The council figures turned to face her. There were 24 of them in total, 2 from each house. Some of them were old, some of them were ancient. Some of them looked younger than Alina, but had eyes that had seen the rise and fall of empires. They wore long, dark coats. They did not move. One of them stepped forward, a tall woman with white hair and a long face. She looked older than the cottage on the hill. She looked older than the Greyburn estate. "Speak your name," she said. Alina spoke. She spoke in the old language. She gave her full name, her name in the bloodline, her name in the line, the name of her mother and her mother's mother and the mother before that, going back to the night of the burning. The council woman closed her eyes when Alina was finished. Several others did the same. "It is true," the woman said. "We can hear it. The line is unbroken. We did not know." "We did not know," murmured several others. The woman turned slowly to face the Vale family on the other side of the courtyard. Vasilia Vale. Lady Vasilia stepped forward. Her chin was high. She looked tired, but she did not look afraid. "You stand accused," the councilwoman said, "of the murder of a bloodline which is the highest crime under our law. The Lysaria were never wiped out as you claimed. Your family lied to the council. Your family lied to the houses. Your family stole the protection that should have belonged to the Lysaria. And tonight, the proof of your lie has walked into this courtyard. My family did what was necessary, Vasilia said. The Lysaria were our enemy. They were powerful. They would have killed us if we had not killed them first. That is a matter for another night, the councilwoman said. Tonight, we are not asking you whether you were right. Tonight, we are telling you that you lied. And the punishment for lying to the council, when the lie touches the murder of a bloodline, is the same as the crime itself. A silence fell over the courtyard. Vasilia did not move. Her face did not change. There is, however, an old provision, the councilwoman said. The injured party may take the punishment into their own hands. The injured party may demand a settling. The bloodlines settle here tonight by the old way, one representative from each side, and we, the council, will witness. The white-haired woman turned to Elena. Is that your wish, daughter of Lysaria? Elena looked across the courtyard. Her eyes went past Vasilia, past the veiled men, past the grandmother. Her eyes settled on Seraphine. Yes, she said, that is my wish. A long silence. And who is your representative? Me, Elena said. And who is the veil representative? Vasilia turned her head. Seraphine. Seraphine had not spoken since the wedding hall. Her face was pale even for her. She did not move at first. She looked at her mother. She looked at her grandmother. She looked at the council. She looked, finally, at Elena. She walked forward. She and Elena met in the center of the courtyard. The council formed a circle around them. The veil stood at the edge of the circle. Marcus stood with Ashton on the other side, watching, with his hand on his old service revolver, which would do nothing useful tonight, but which he carried anyway out of habit. Seraphine spoke first. You took my wedding from me. You took my family from me, Elena said. I did nothing to your family. I was not even alive. You were the inheritor of what your family stole. You were going to drain a good man and walk away rich. You earned this. Seraphine bared her teeth. You have nothing, she said. You are a girl in a maid's uniform. I am a veil. You are nothing. Elena did not bare her teeth back. Elena did not raise her voice. Elena did something stranger. She knelt down. She placed her right hand flat on the ground of the courtyard. Palm down, fingers spread. She closed her eyes. The mark on her wrist began to glow again, red, brighter than it had been in the great hall, bright enough that the council figures took a step back, bright enough that the courtyard itself seemed to flicker. The grass in the cracks of the stone began to move. Tendrils of something not vine, not root, something older began to rise from between the broken stones. This was the old place. This was where her people had died, and the ground here remembered them. Elena spoke quietly in her old language, 3 words, the same 3 words she had spoken in the great hall. The ground answered her. A wind rose in the courtyard, though the night was still. Around Seraphine's feet, the broken stone of the floor began to crack. Old roots burst upward, old vines wrapped around her ankles. She tried to step back and could not. She tried to lift her foot and could not. She looked down, she looked up. What is this? Stop it. This place is mine, Elena said. She stood up. This valley is mine. The ground here knows what your family did. The ground here has been waiting 240 years for me to come back and say my name on it. The ground knows whose blood was spilled here, and the ground has chosen. Seraphine pulled at her foot. She fell to one knee. She bared her fangs at Elena. Elena walked toward her slowly. She stopped in front of her. Look at me, Elena said. Seraphine looked. You slapped me in front of 200 guests tonight. Why? Because I felt something when I touched your wrist. What did you feel? I don't know. You felt your end, Elena said. Your body knew before you did. The moment you reached for that champagne glass, your body knew the Lysaria was back, and you struck because you were afraid. You weren't strong, you were afraid. Seraphine's eyes were wet suddenly. She was 26 years old by appearance. She was in some ways no older than that in her soul. She had been raised on power. She had never been frightened of anything in her life. She was frightened now. Elena reached out. She placed 2 fingers under Seraphine's chin. She tilted Seraphine's face up. I am not going to kill you tonight, Seraphine Vale. The whole courtyard heard her. What? I am not going to kill you. The council looked at each other. This was not what they had expected. By the old way, the duel was to the end. By the old way, a settling was final. Elena turned to the council. I am claiming the older right, the right that came before the settling. The white-haired councilwoman tilted her head. Speak. The right of binding, Elena said. The right of a Lysaria to bind a bloodline that wronged us into service for one generation. The veil line will not be ended. The veil line will not pass into other hands. But for one generation, for as long as Seraphine Veil is alive, the veils will serve the Lysaria. They will return what they stole. They will give up their seats at the council. They will give up their hunting rights. They will give up the names of every human family they have drained from. And they will, every one of them, declare publicly what they are, so that no other Ashton Greyburn ever walks into a marriage like the one I walked into tonight. The council was silent. Then slowly, the white-haired woman nodded. The binding is older than the settling, she said. It is your right, we witness it. Vasilia took a step forward. No, Seraphine, no. But the binding had already begun. The mark on Elena's wrist flared. A line of red light stretched from her wrist to Seraphine's heart. It hung in the air for a moment, then sank into Seraphine's chest. Seraphine gasped. Her hands flew to her chest. The roots and vines around her feet released her. She stumbled forward into Elena's arms. Elena held her for a long moment, almost like a sister. Live, Elena said quietly. Live, and remember every day what your family did. That is your sentence, live. She let go. Seraphine fell to her knees. She did not get up. The councilwoman looked at Vasilia. It is done. The veil line lives, but it is bound. Every veil in this country, in this generation, is bound. We will enforce it. We have witnessed. Vasilia's face was finally, completely broken. The council turned. One by one they walked back to their cars. The white-haired woman was the last. She paused at the edge of the courtyard. She looked back at Elena. Daughter of Lysaria, she said, welcome back. She got into her car. The cars left one by one. The veils followed slower, helping the grandmother walk. They carried Seraphine between them, her veil dragging on the ground. When they were gone, the courtyard was empty except for Elena, Marcus, and Ashton. The dawn was beginning, very faintly, to gray the eastern sky. Ashton walked across the courtyard slowly. He did not speak. He stood next to Elena. He looked up at the stone walls. He looked down at the cracked floor where the roots had risen. He looked at her. You knew, he said, all along. You knew what they were. You knew what was going to happen tonight. I knew. You came to the wedding to stop it. I came to the wedding for you. He looked at her. He thought about that for a long time. Why, he said finally. Elena did not answer right away. She was looking at the broken stones, thinking about her grandmother, thinking about a small hill cottage that was now a pile of ash, thinking about a 3-year-old girl in a flour sack 240 years ago being carried out of a burning house. Because nobody came for them, she said quietly. 240 years ago, when my family was being murdered in this valley, nobody came. The other bloodlines stood aside. The humans in the nearby villages closed their shutters. The council looked the other way. There was a wedding that night, too. A different wedding, but a wedding all the same. A human husband and a veiled bride. He was drained on a marble floor not unlike the one in your great hall. And then the veils rode here. And they finished us off. She was quiet for a moment. My grandmother told me every winter since I was 4 years old. She told me the story of the night nobody came. And she told me if I ever had the chance to be the one who came, to be that one. To not let it happen to another family, to not let it happen to another good man. I had the chance tonight. I took it. Ashton looked at her for a long time. Thank you, he said. It was all he could find to say. They stayed in the courtyard until the sun came up. Marcus made a small fire in a corner against the wall. He warmed some bread from the basket. They ate. They did not talk much. There was not much to say. When the sun rose, the courtyard looked different, smaller, less haunted. The roots that had broken through the stones were gone. The vines were back to being just vines. The walls were just old walls. The place was, for the first time in 240 years, just a place. They drove back west in the morning light. They did not go to the Greyburn estate. The Greyburn estate was no longer safe and would not be for some time. Marcus knew of a small house on the coast. They went there. It took Ashton 3 weeks to understand what had happened to his life. He spent the first week mostly silent. He spent the second week reading old books that Marcus brought him. Books on the bloodlines, on the council, on the history that had been hidden inside the history he thought he knew. He spent the third week walking on the beach. At the end of the third week, he came to Elena, who was sitting on the porch of the house with a cup of tea. "I want to tell my cousins," he said, "and my partners and my school friends. I want to tell them what they were almost married into, what I was almost married into. They should know." "They won't believe you." "Some will, some won't. I have to try." Elena nodded. "It will be dangerous. Even with the binding, the other bloodlines will not love you for it." "I have you," he said, "and Marcus, and whoever your grandmother taught." She nodded again. "Yes, you do." He sat next to her on the porch step. For a long moment they looked out at the sea. "I am sorry," she said, "that you fell in love with someone who was lying to you. I am sorry that the first thing I did to you was tell you the truth about her on the worst night of your life. I am sorry that the marriage you wanted, the future you wanted, was a lie." He did not answer for a while. "Don't be sorry," he said eventually. "Be the one who came." She looked at him. He was looking at the sea. She smiled, very small, and looked back at the water. "Now where are they now? People always want to know where they are now. It has been 4 years since that night." The binding has held. The Vale family has, true to the council's enforcement, given up its seats, its rights, and its names. Lord Ashton Greyburn used his fortune and his old name to create what he called the Bright List, a public, slowly growing record of every family in the country that the Vales and other bloodlines had drained from over the past 200 years. The descendants of those families have, in many cases, been able to recover what was stolen. In other cases, they have only been able to recover the truth. Sometimes that is enough. Seraphine Vale lives in a small apartment in a city. She works as part of the binding in a hospice, sitting at the bedsides of dying humans. She holds their hands, she listens. Some nights when she comes home, she cries. The Vale grandmother is dead. Vasilia is alive but quiet. Most of the other Vales have, by now, accepted what they are and what they are not. Marcus is still Marcus. He still drives. He still carries an old service revolver that does not do much against vampires, but that he carries out of habit. He has slowed down a little, not much. Elena lives in the small house on the coast. She has rebuilt parts of it. There is a garden in the back. There are books on the shelves. The mark on her wrist is still there, though it does not glow most days. She is teaching in quiet ways the language of the Lycaria to a small number of students. Some of them are descendants of the old Lycaria scattered around the world who heard about her after the night at the old place and came to find her. Some of them are humans she has chosen. The line is rebuilding. Slowly, but it is rebuilding. Ashton lives in the house too. He has, over the years, learned a few words of the old language. He is not very good at it. He laughs when he tries. He is not married. He has not asked Elena to marry him. He has not had to. They are something the old words do not quite have a name for, and they are not in any particular hurry to give it one. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, they sit on the porch and watch the sea. Sometimes Ashton thinks about the night of the wedding. He thinks about the moment he was about to give his toast. The candle flames flickering, the hundreds of faces watching, the bride beside him in her white dress and her white gloves, and the maid passing by with the silver tray of champagne. And then the slap. He thinks about that slap a lot because he understands now what it was. It was not anger, it was not pride. It was a creature who had seen her own end coming and had reached out to swat it away. And that creature in the swatting had revealed everything she was, to him, to his cousins, to his school friends, to all 200 people in that hall. If Seraphine had not slapped Elena that night, Ashton would have been drained 4 hours later. The wedding would have ended. The Vale family would have absorbed his fortune, and nobody would have ever known what happened to him. Just another rich man who married a strange foreign bride and then disappeared. The slap saved his life. It was the worst thing Seraphine ever did to anyone, and it was also the moment her family lost everything. Because the moment her glove cracked across Elena's cheek, every single person in that hall turned to look. Every single Greyburn cousin saw it happen. Every single business partner saw her face. Every single school friend saw the bride that Ashton was about to marry, and the woman she really was. A slap is a small thing, 2 ounces of motion, half a second of contact. It can also be the thing that ends a dynasty. That night it was. Elena and Ashton sit on the porch. The sea moves. The sun goes down. Inside the house, Marcus is making dinner. The mark on Elena's wrist is quiet. In the dark of the eastern sky, the first stars come out. A long way away, in a small apartment in a city, Seraphine Vale sits next to the bed of a dying old man. She holds his hand. He does not know who she is. He does not know what she is. He only knows that someone is with him. She stays until he is gone, then she walks home in the dark alone, quiet, bound, alive. And that, my friend, is what happened the night a vampire bride slapped a maid in front of everyone at her own wedding. That is the whole story. Stay well, and the next time a stranger walks into a room and goes very, very still, pay attention. You may have just met someone who came.